You know, as more and more time passes by, I feel like Arcane Season 2 has become such a controversial topic over the internet. To say that Season 2 literally doubled the popularity of this show and had so many people hooked for 3 weeks in a row, it's kinda crazy in retrospect to see so many people say that Season 2 was one of the worst things they've ever watched and that it was absolutely horrible. And look, was Season 2 perfect? No. But was it better than Season 1? Still no. But still, I feel like it did have a lot of redeeming aspects, and at the end of the day, I did find it enjoyable. But if I did have to criticize anything from Season 2, one thing that I just absolutely hated that doesn't sit right with me to this day, it would be the relationship between Caitlyn and Vi, or as the internet likes to call them, Caitvi. You see, I hate this ship for numerous reasons, one of the biggest being that it's an actual canon thing, but also because how Season 2 dealt with their relationship. Because don't get me wrong, in Season 1, I was just like a lot of you. I was 100% behind the Yuri romance. But by Season 2, it was insane to me that these two were not only together, but also that people online thought they were a good couple. And since this topic has been eating at my soul ever since Season 2 ended, I thought, hey, let's finally make a video just giving out all my gripes when it comes to this relationship. So one of the biggest aspects between Caitlyn and Vi's dynamic is how they're both from two different worlds. When we're first introduced to Vi, we see that she's an Undercity kid who's had to fight her entire life. Not only to be able to protect herself, but also to be able to protect the people that she loves. She had to grow up quick, she had to be strong, and as a result, she saw firsthand that the world could be a very cruel place. But when you compare this to Caitlyn's upbringing, it's completely different. Caitlyn grew up not only rich, but a part of the Kiraman household, one of the major houses in Piltover. She had both her parents growing up and pretty much lived in luxury. And look, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm trying to say rich people don't have struggles, but it did not seem like Caitlyn was struggling growing up. The writers didn't even give her the trope of, oh, she's rich, but she has neglectful parents. No, she had very loving, active, involved parents in her life. So when Caitlyn and Vi meet for the first time, Vi, this rough around the edges girl that has seen some of the worst that the world has to offer, and Caitlyn, this sheltered rich girl that wants to help the world but is naive because she's never actually experienced real life, it sets up this interesting dynamic where both characters have perceived assumptions about each other, but they're both clueless because neither one has actually experienced the life of the other. Vi holds this perception that she can't trust Caitlyn because in her mind, due to her experiences, topsiders are evil in the sense that they're always trying to screw over people from the Undercity, which in reality isn't always the truth. And Caitlyn holds this perception that because she's an enforcer, that means she's a symbol of good law and justice, not realizing that the very organization that she's a part of is full of many crooked people that have caused the suffering of many, and I mean many people from the Undercity. Season 1 does a great job tearing down the perspectives of not only these characters when it comes to each other, but also their own lives. For a moment, Vi starts to believe that maybe topsiders aren't as bad as she thought and they actually can help solve the injustice in the Undercity. And Caitlyn starts to realize that maybe the topsiders aren't all good, maybe they are causing a lot of problems for the people in the Undercity. And she does try to confront this issue by bringing it to the council. And I think what I really liked about their dynamic in Season 1 was that they were so different, at least in how they were raised and their upbringings, but they weren't so different that they couldn't understand one another. And because they met each other, they started to get a different perspective of the world. And don't get me wrong, even though schizophrenic sisters was an obstacle for them, I was really rooting for Caitlyn and Vi, at least in Season 1. They seemed like together they were really gonna bring the light out of one another. But then Season 2 came around and I was just like, dude, what am I even watching right now? Because watching their relationship in Season 2 was a complete dumpster fire, and it honestly amazes me that they even stayed together. So Season 2 picked up right where Season 1 ended, and we got to see the aftermath of Jinx's attack on the council. And in that aftermath, we found out that Caitlyn's mom was one of the council members that actually died. And after a sad funeral and some crying and hugging, we get the first crazy moment between Caitlyn and Vi in this season. And this is the moment where Caitlyn gives Vi a badge and asks her to become an enforcer to help her find and stop Jinx. Now, to anyone who watched this show, it shouldn't be a surprise why this moment was absolutely insane, but just in case you're a little confused, the enforcers are quite literally the people that murdered Vi's parents. Our very first introduction to Vi and her sister as kids is literally seconds after her parents are murdered by enforcers during a rebellion. So, you know, it's just kind of a crazy concept being presented with the symbol of the people that murdered your parents and being asked to be a part of that group now and to work for them. And I think what I hate most about this moment is how Caitlyn tries to gaslight Vi into thinking that their situations are similar, which, you know, you can't really blame the character because they wouldn't know this, but from anyone who's watched the show as a whole, Vi's parents dying and Caitlyn's mother dying is not similar in any way possible. Because in the scene, Vi says, "I watched them kill my parents. Do you have any idea how that feels?" And Caitlyn responds, "Yeah, I do," referring to Jinx killing her mother. But here's the thing, Vi, her parents, and the rest of the people in the Undercity live in an oppressed system where the people of Piltover, the land that Caitlyn is from, make their lives miserable. They poison their air, which is why characters like Victor grow up to have disabilities. They have little resources, which is why characters like Echo and Jinx grow up to be malnourished. And if they get quote unquote out of line, they literally just send enforcers down to either kill them or throw them in jail. So Vi's parents died in a rebellion to try to separate Zaun from Piltover and give Zaun a better life, and were literally killed by their oppressors. Now if we take a look at Caitlyn's mom, even though she may not seem like the worst person in the entire show, she is still a council member for a city that is literally responsible for oppressing an entire city of people. Their neglect to govern Zaun turned it into such a terrible place where now crime lords are running all over the place, and people like Silco, who is working with dirty enforcers from Piltover, is getting innocent people either hooked on Shimmer or just murdering them. And it's only when war is threatened at their homes that they actually stop and think, okay, maybe we should try to make things a little peaceful between Piltover and Zaun. But by then it's too late because Jinx has already shot a rocket at them. So I wouldn't say Vi's parents being murdered during a rebellion because they're trying to have a better life is anywhere near similar to Caitlyn's mom, who is killed because she's a part of an oppressive council. And don't get me wrong, I understand why it would be sad for Caitlyn, but just imagine you had to watch your parents be murdered in front of you, and then you have to continue to live a terrible life because of the system that the people who murdered your parents set up. And then one day someone that you got really close to comes to you and goes, "Hey, you know those people that murdered your parents? I want you to put on their uniform and I want you to work for them." You would literally lose your mind. But somehow, someway, in the span of only an episode, Vi manages to put all her trauma to the side and she agrees to become an enforcer. But if I'm being honest, Vi becoming an enforcer wasn't the craziest thing in the world to me. Vi wanted to take down Jinx at the time, and she also wanted to go with Caitlyn and make sure that nobody else got hurt. But what did completely shock me, just had me absolutely speechless, is what Vi agreed to when they went on the hunt for Jinx. Because when they go hunting for Jinx, they don't just go looking for her. Caitlyn uses the ventilation systems to gas certain neighborhoods in the Undercity so that they can get jumps on certain people and interrogate them to find Jinx. Now, if we're just going to ignore the fact that if this was real life, this would be considered a war crime, I've already talked about how characters like Victor literally develop diseases because the air in the Undercity is so toxic. So now Caitlyn's just adding on to that pollution. And I've seen certain people try to defend this and say, oh, people need to realize that Caitlyn wasn't gassing the entire Undercity, it was just certain neighborhoods. But if we just think a little bit hard about it, we know that gas spreads in the air. If I let off a gas bomb down the street from you, it's most likely going to spread towards you. So the idea that Caitlyn was just letting out these large amounts of gas into the air and the only people getting affected were people who quote unquote deserved it is insane. And what's even more insane is that Vi was with her every step of the way. Like, I was genuinely confused watching this. Vi, who literally hated enforcers just one season ago, is now helping them gas the Undercity, her home? That's insane to me. And this kind of leads me into the main reason why I don't really like Caitlyn and Vi as a relationship. When Vi was first introduced as a character, she was introduced as a leader. Not just the leader of her siblings, but she was looked up to by characters like Echo, and even Silco would acknowledge her as Vander's prodigy. And when you looked at Vi's character throughout season 1, it always felt like there was a bigger purpose for her, like there was something that she was supposed to accomplish. I mean, we literally had scenes like this in season 1.
And one day, this city's gonna respect us.
And you could say maybe it's because Arcane really should have had a third season, but it feels like in an effort to put Caitlyn and Vi together, Vi's character drastically got suppressed throughout season 2. Because essentially by the end of it, Vi basically just becomes Caitlyn's sidekick and does things with Caitlyn that Vi from season 1 never would have did, and Vi from season 2 never should have did. Like, I saw this TikTok of writers from Arcane talking about Vi's dynamic with Caitlyn, and I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing.
And I also needed a reason that Vi could respect Caitlyn despite that. And like when she was able to look past the like all cops are evil thing, she like
all cops are evil thing.
And it's statements like this that just made me think, like, am I not paying attention? Am I watching the wrong show? Because give me one moment where Vi should ever came to the conclusion that, oh, she shouldn't hate cops anymore, that like she just likes cops now. Cops are responsible for murdering her parents. They're also responsible for throwing her in jail for 7 years. You can say when she met Caitlyn, that showed her that all cops aren't bad, but the second Caitlyn got some skin in the game and and lost someone important to her, she started using her power to do stuff like gas the Undercity. Not to mention Caitlyn, the only cop that Vi ever trusted, literally stabbed her in the gut with the back of her rifle and abandoned her for like 2 months. And look, at the end of the day, I am not against Caitlyn and Vi getting together. I thought it was obvious that that was going to happen in season 1. But I feel like if they absolutely had to go down the Vi becomes an enforcer route, there should have been some moment, some point where Vi sees the good in being an enforcer. And it feels like the ending we got with these two is just undeserved, because by the end of it, Vi's still working as an enforcer with Caitlyn, but we never get any reason as to why Vi would keep doing this other than the fact that she's with Caitlyn, which isn't a good reason because we know Vi's history with enforcers. And ultimately, this is just the reason why I hate Caitvi as a couple. Don't hate the concept, but the execution and what we ended up getting, it was just kind of terrible. But yeah, that's the end of my video. So like, comment, subscribe, and until then, it's been your boy Corin, and I'm off this.